Dimitri Garter, I'm Director of the Lightning Jar. Welcome, and thank you for coming out on, finally, a nice spring day. So appreciate you taking time out of your day. So, couple of quick words about the Lightning Jar and our sponsors, and then I'm going to hand it off to Alan. So the Lightning Jar is a co-working space and business incubator here in Bennington. We've been up and running for about 1.5 years now. Our mission is twofold. One is to create new small businesses as an economic development strategy here in southwestern Vermont. And the other is to create professional development and networking opportunities for folks in the workforce. So we've had a tremendous amount of success with the project so far, and this event is part of our leadership speaker series, bringing people with interesting stories to tell into Bennington so that we could use it as an opportunity to learn how folks are doing things out there in the world. So we have, our next event is going to be September 14th. Ann Galloway, editor of VT Digger, is going to be coming to Bennington to talk about the fake news phenomenon and the erosion of the free press and what it's doing to our democracy. So I would really encourage you to come to that event, and you can find information on our website. So a quick word about our sponsors, just a quick thank you to the Lightning Jar, Bennington Young Professionals. I think all these folks are here. So the Bennington Area Chamber of Commerce and the Shire's Regional Branding, Tap House at Catamount Glass, GVH Studios, the Grill at Mount Anthony Country Club, Bright Ideas Brewing in North Adams, Mass, via CCU, who's the Lightning Jar's main sponsor and hosting organization, and Bennington College. So a quick round of applause for our sponsors. So I really don't have much to say about Alan. I think his story speaks for itself. He's the unlikely serial entrepreneur who comes from a non-traditional entrepreneurship background. And that story is really important for us down here in Bennington because we're basically building an entrepreneurship culture from the ground up. So we're looking for non-traditional entrepreneurs who can be taught the skill and don't necessarily think of them as being in sort of the traditional entrepreneurship track. So I think you'll find it a fascinating story, and really looking forward to it. And I just want to say I had one of the most meta experiences ever where I got to buy Alan a beer that his company brewed. So that was a great experience for me, and I'll put that on my resume. So a big round of applause for Alan.
Hello, Bennington. Hi, how are you guys? So since you're going to hear my story, I'm going to spill my guts. Before I start, I want to know a little bit about who the hell you people are. So if anybody here has an MBA, raise your hand. We're not going to kick you out, but thanks. Anybody here starting and running their own business? Whoa. It's impressive. Man, you people are not very bright. And how many of you are in what I would call jobs in corporate America? One last question, and then I'll start. How many, see, I'm too old. This used to be a great question. How many of you who started your own business delivered newspapers when you were in school? Really? Some youngins out there. Oh. This used to be one of my key measures of entrepreneurship. But as newspapers disappeared, as it no longer works. So anyway, that's really interesting, a lot more than I expected. So as you heard, I'm Alan Newman. I am the most unlikely serial entrepreneur you will ever meet. There's absolutely nothing in my background that gave me any indication that I would actually start a business, and I would start 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 businesses. Just was never part of the equation. And as I sit here at age 70, looking back, even I, if I had hair, would scratch my hair, because it doesn't make sense to me. And there's not a single thing, as I walk you through my life story of businesses, there's going to be a couple constant themes. Number one, not a single thing I've done has been intentional. Every single one has happened by accident, happenstance. And to me, I have been a fan for years of arguing that the world turns on the theory of chaos, not evolution. And if you want to debate with me, I will tell you stories about my daughter, who spent her entire elementary, junior high school, and high school years studying to go to the finest school in the world for medieval history and English literature. She found that school, the finest school in the world for medieval history and English literature. It was smack in the middle of all medieval history. It was St. Andrews in Scotland. It was on the North Sea, where medieval history unfolded. Every great English writer either taught or went to school at St. Andrews. She was in the 600th class to graduate from St. Andrews. So she got to St. Andrews to study medieval history and English literature, and promptly took up Arabic. I rest my case. And as you hear my story, you will see that that limb didn't fall far from the tree. So, growing up, I was kicked out of many schools. There was one period where I was at 4 schools in 5 years. I actually was kicked out of one of them twice. I'm quite proud of it. And I had no interest in business. I never took a business course in my life. I never had any interest in it. I had no educational background. And I moved to Vermont in 1970. How many of you were alive? Actually, a bunch of you were kind of old. So usually these groups are younger, and nobody was alive in 1970. So it's a bad question for this group. So I moved up here in 1970, and I quickly discovered this is a tough place to get a job, especially when you have my personality. I'm relatively unemployable, I've discovered. Every time I've been fired from a job, which is almost every job I've ever had, the term insubordinate comes up. And they're right. I am insubordinate. And so I really didn't have a lot of choices. And I really had, there was really no option other than to figure out how to make my own way. And my first business, I was a consultant for years that kind of wasn't really a business, but it supported me, and it was kind of interesting. And then, from the middle of the mountains, we decided with a friend of mine to start a business that was going to sell yacht timeshares in all over the world. It was an incredible failure, but it was a really great experience, because what it taught me was, and everything I've done, you're going to hear I've been kicked out of almost every business I've started, and people say, well, you know, how do you live with that? And the answer is, you know, each one has been a great experience, and I've learned interesting stuff, and I've always looked forward. So in that business, in the timeshare, what I learned was trying to hit singles, not home runs. You know, we tried to hit a home run coming out of the gate. We blew all of our money without testing the concepts. We blew all of our money without understanding whether the proposition made any sense. And by the time we understood what would work, we were out of money. And in business, number one rule, don't run out of money. When you run out of money, the game is over. And so that one really taught me, you know, to Alan, you know, go for singles. You know, just try to keep the ball in play. Every once in a while, you're going to get lucky. You know, maybe the ball will drop into a hole and you'll get a double out of it. Maybe it'll roll to the fence and you get a triple. And every once in a while, number 9, you get the ball that heads over the fence. But I don't think you can plan on those things. I think you can plan on hitting singles. And so I really built a career. I was just talking to some folks earlier. You know, I used to have this huge argument with the guy who worked for me on whether I was a risk taker or risk averse. And I've always contended I'm risk averse because I always start small. I always try to hit singles. And then I always try to follow up with another hit to move the runner along, to use baseball analogies. And I don't know why, because I don't really like baseball. But the analogies work great. So I think that, to me, is one of the main things I learned in that first business. And then there was this thing I realized that I better find, if I wanted to live in Vermont, and I did, I figured I'd better find a way of doing a business that was bigger than Vermont. Vermont only had 600,000 people, and I was really concerned about population density. And I started looking around, and there was this new invention that had just started to get popular. It was a thing called computers. Anybody ever hear of these? They're around everywhere today, but in 1978, they weren't around everywhere. They were just starting. And I was fascinated with computers. I was also fascinated with this thing called mail order. And I figured, you know, in Vermont, if I understood computers better, and I understood mail order, that would give me the skills to be able to have the whole world at my fingertips. So the long story cut really short, there was a little nonprofit who was advertising for somebody to run the computer and run their little mail order business, and I figured, that's me, because I knew nothing about either. So they hired me, and after, it was a nonprofit called National Gardening Association, or Gardens for All at the time, and I was just getting ready to quit. You know, it's like I'd been there for a year, I got what I came there to learn, I was working for somebody else, never my strength. And I figured, you know, it's time to tell my boss that it's time for me to move on. And he came up to me and he said, hey, I'm going down to southern Vermont. This is, by the way, southern Vermont. I'm going down to southern Vermont, and on Friday, why don't you come with me? And I'd love your thoughts on what I'm going to visit. I don't even remember what it was. And I said, great, good opportunity for me to tell him. I'm leaving. So we get in the car, and before I can say it, he goes, you know, Alan, we're going to separate National Gardening Association, or Gardens for All, into two totally different businesses. And so-and-so is going to take the nonprofit portion, they're going to run that, and I'm going to take the little mail order division that you've been doing, and I'm going to spin that off. And I'd like you to come with us. You can be the vice president, and you can run the operations and the finance and the computer, because that's what I did in those days, as shocking as that sounds to me. And I had nothing better to do, so I said, okay. And that was the beginning of Gardener Supply Company. We grew reasonably rapidly. What really kind of fascinated me about the Gardener Supply Company experience is really two things. Will was really the driver of that business. And he had a belief. The belief was that if we're going to hire people to sell gardening supplies, we should hire people who are passionate about gardening. I know that sounds radical. It was to me, quite frankly. And I thought that was a pretty good idea. And so we only hired people who were passionate about gardening, because that way we didn't have to train them on gardening. They had all the gardening experience. All we had to do was teach them how to treat our customers. And the way we did that was we treated them the way we wanted them to treat our customers. And so it was a really good experience about how you take passionate people and turn them into great employees of an organization who's remaining passionate about the business. The second thing I learned, and equally important, was, I'll remember in a second, because it was important. The second thing I learned was that you could actually bring your own personal values into the business. And while in today's world, in Vermont, that may not sound all that surprising to you, but as somebody who grew up looking at business people in three-piece suits who went to these crummy little offices and treated people like shit because it was business and who cares, this was a radical thought to me. And we would sit around, Will and I would sit around, you know, after everybody had left, and Will would say, you know, Alan, we spend more time together than we do with our families. You know, why aren't we treating each other in the business the same way or better than why aren't we treating our families better than we're treating our staff? And so also we talked about how do we bring our own personal values in? And this was a radical thought. Anybody here ever hear of a guy named Lyman Wood? Lyman Wood, in my opinion, was probably the single greatest incubator for entrepreneurial business in the state of Vermont. Go Google Lyman and Google the businesses. He started a business called Gardenway, published Gardenway years ago, Troy built rototillers, and the number of entrepreneurs that started up businesses after Troy built Gardenway exploded is phenomenal. And Lyman saw business in a different way. He would give, when people had vacation time, he would pay them double. Lyman, why do you do that? He said, well, when people go away, all their regular expenses continue. They don't stop. They need their paycheck to make their mortgage payment, to pay their heat bill. And we want them to have a good time. So we give them an extra paycheck to go on vacation. That was a concept, I cannot tell you how radical that was to me. And so at Garden Supply Company, I really learned that business is not that image that I had in my head of men, white men in three-piece suits going into offices to churn paperwork. I started to think, oh, this is kind of interesting. Both luckily and unluckily, Garden Supply Company didn't grow fast enough for both Will and I to operate out of the same building. We both had our own ideas. Remember the insubordinate thing I mentioned? He found me to be quite insubordinate. And I relished being insubordinate. And so it was time for me to move on. You're going to see a reoccurring theme. So long story cut really short, I started a business using the Garden Supply Company staff, warehousing, and computers in their off-season. Their off-season was mail orders high season. And so we worked out a plan so that I could help Garden Supply Company by using their employees, by using their space, and using their computer at a time that it was really slow for them. And I started what's called a service bureau for mail order companies, for companies, mostly nonprofits who had little divisions. One of my clients, I was heavily involved in the environmental movement back in those days, back in the days of Madeline Cunin, thank you very much. You came in on cue, good job, folks. Back in the days of Madeline Cunin, she was big on environmental activity, and she created environmental leaders in every community, and I was the one for Huntington, Vermont. We used to plant Jerusalem artichokes and make alcohol out of the Jerusalem artichokes and make lawnmowers run. And we did surveys on how can we cut down energy usage in Huntington, Vermont. And I was heavily involved in the environment. Nobody else, by the way, cared in those days. And I had this client called Renew America. It was a nonprofit in DC, and they had a catalog of renewable energy products and energy conservation products. It was by far the worst catalog I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, it was just awful. You know, coupled with the fact that nobody really, it's kind of hard to imagine today, but nobody cared about the environment back in the mid-'80s. I mean, nobody paid any attention. And so here was a company really doing a lousy job of presenting their products to a group of people who didn't care. It didn't go really well for them, and they were a nonprofit, and their board said after 2 years, you gotta get rid of this catalog. So they did the obvious thing, they came to me, because I was doing all their order processing, and I had actually given them a proposal on what they should do if they really wanted to make this business work. And they came to me and said, Alan, we think you should buy the business. I said, well, that's great. There's only two problems. Number one, you don't have a business. Number two, I don't have any money. So why don't you go find somebody who has money who wants your business, and then I'm happy to continue being the service bureau. Long story cut short, they tried to sell, they kept coming back, I kept saying no. Finally, they came to the office one day and they said, you know, Alan, if you don't take this catalog, it's going in the garbage can. Now my brain was saying, oh, that's really too bad. You know, here's the garbage can. And then out of my mouth came, okay, I'll take it. And to this day, I refer to that as God speaking. Because there was nothing in my head about taking this catalog. I really had no interest. There was no business. I couldn't imagine how this could become a real business. And I had no money to invest in it. But here I was, it was now June. We had to get the first catalog in the mail by August. They had, if we wanted to make a business, they had, the catalog was what's called it was an 8.5 by 11, and all the pictures of the products were this big, and you couldn't see them. But I didn't have time to reshoot the products. So I cut the page in half, so at least you could see the products. Changed the name to 7th Generation, changed the concept to Products for a Healthy Planet, and put out the first catalog. I gotta tell you, we had low expectations. But all of a sudden, people actually ordered. They ordered stuff. They ordered more than we had. And then the New York Times picked up a piece. Luckily, in the piece the New York Times picked up, we said send $2 for a catalog. Because over the next 6 months, I don't know if you people understand how this works. If the New York Times puts an article in, then almost every newspaper in America, and there used to be newspapers in America, every one of them picks up the column from the New York Times. And so luckily, when I did the story, I said, if people want a catalog, they should send $2, because frequently we said, we'll do it for free. So for the next 6 to 9 months, every day, all these envelopes would come in with $2 in them. And we would open the mail every day. We'd have these stacks of dollar bills. And so the deal was, everybody hated opening these stupid envelopes. And so the deal was, here's the deal, folks. We're going to open every one of these. $1 goes into the bank to pay for the catalog. $1 goes into a party for the summer. And that motivated people to open those envelopes and save those dollars. 7th Generation started growing far more rapidly than I ever expected. I could talk about 7th Generation forever. About a year in, I took in a partner who originally was hired to help me raise money. There's this myth, and I don't know who started this myth or where it came from, that when you grow a business, the cash from growing the business supports the growth of that business. Let me make this really clear. That is a myth. That does not happen. Growing businesses chew cash. So if you're going to grow a business, you better be prepared with cash. I knew that by this time, and the catalog business really needed cash. So I took in this partner who was going to help raise money. I took him in as a consultant first to help raise money. Over time, he became my partner. Booming success, off the charts. And about 2 years later, we had a little slowdown, and he decided he didn't want me around. So he fired me, and he had brought in all the board, and he really wanted to take the business into a different direction than I did, blah, blah, blah. So I leave, and he takes the business and one more business down the tubes. So then, I really was trying to figure out what to do next, because, you know, I didn't really have any great plan. I looked at a bunch of different ideas. I really wanted to get into the music business. I actually tried to buy a local music label that had a little business to go with it. That fell through. I actually found a club in Austin, Texas that had its own blues label, its own blues record store, and its own blues club. And I thought, this is perfect. And I made an offer, and the offer got to them a day after they accepted somebody else's offer. End of that one. So I'm walking down the street one day, and back at 7th Generation, I had hired an old friend of mine to run the warehouse. He was doing a job he wasn't crazy about. I said, why don't you come build a warehouse for 7th Generation? I said, okay. So Bob came in to do that. Bob liked doing things. He didn't like managing. And Bob was a classically trained French chef. And he made beer. And Bob would have these parties. And everybody would go to Bob's parties because great food. And in Bob's kitchen sink, he had 3 spigots. He had a hot water spigot, he had a cold water spigot, and then he had a spigot out of which came this gooey brown liquid. I go, Bob, what's this? He goes, that's beer, Alan. I go, no, Bob, don't shit. Beer is yellow and fizzy and tasteless, and this is dark and flavorful and really is delicious. He goes, well, Alan, that's what beer is supposed to be like. So he's really the one who started me on trying beer, on what we now call craft beer. And I kind of became fascinated. He came to me, about 6 months before I left Magic Hat, a year before that, and said, you know, Alan, This really isn't exactly what I had in mind. I'm managing $6 million worth of inventory. I've got 75 people reporting to me. I'm done. Don't take it personally, but I'm gonna leave. And what are you gonna do? I'm gonna go start a brewery. And I remember thinking, damn, if I had the time and money, I'd love to build a brewery for Bob to make his beer, because I love Bob's beer. Bob leaves, I get thrown out of 7th generation. I'm walking down the street one day, I run into Bob. I haven't seen him for 6 months. What are you doing? Well, I'm getting ready to start a brewery. Where? Martha's Vineyard. Well, why Martha's Vineyard? Because that's where the offer is. I said, well, if you change your mind, you want to start a brewery here, we can do that. He goes, okay. That was the inspiration behind Magic Hat. So I knew nothing about beer. So we decided that I should probably learn something. And so the West Coast was really the epicenter of beer back in the early 90s. This is 92, early 93. So Bob and I flew to Seattle. We rented a car. We drove down the coast. We stopped in 33 breweries in 11 days. Every brewery showed us around, and when they got done showing us around, every brewery said, would you like to try our beer? Now, how do you say no? And they've just been hospitable enough to show us around, so you say sure. Now, you want to know a little secret? No brewery has only one beer. And when they offer that beer, they don't really mean, would you like to try our one beer? They mean, would you like to try every one of our beers? And after 33 stops, I want to tell you, it was the only time in my life I ever saw Bob turn down beer. But that's how we learned what to do. What we saw was everybody was doing the same thing. Everybody's back, you go back into the early 90s, everybody was naming their brewery after some geographic region. Everybody was naming their beer after the style. Burlington Bay Pale Ale. Made with only the finest all-natural ingredients. Every single beer said that. Are you kidding, Alan? Every beer? Come on! Every beer said made with only the finest all-natural ingredients. So we made a rule. We're not going to name it after a geography. We're not going to name our beers after the style. And we're not going to talk about only the finest all-natural ingredients. We're going to do things differently than everybody else out there. And on that trip, we decided to really focus on music, because that's really, I wanted to be in the music business. And we decided to really, that's really where the whole concept of Magic Hat came from, that 11-day trip doing 33 breweries. We talked about different yeast styles, we talked about different styles of beer, we talked about different grains, we talked about different equipment, we talked about different setups, how do you brand it, and that was really where Magic Hat started. Magic Hat was a great run. I was there 17 years from startup until we actually acquired a West Coast brewery called Pyramid. We were the Magic Hat alone was the 8th largest brewery in America at the time. We always said we were the 9th largest because we liked being number 9 better. But we were really the 8th largest. And when we bought Pyramid, I think we moved to number 4. We were the 4th largest brewery in America at the time. Unfortunately, 2 weeks after we bought Pyramid, does anybody remember this thing called a bank collapsing in 08? And our loan to pay for the brewery that we just bought had this little paragraph at the bottom of the term sheet that said, oh, by the way, we can take this back at any point for no reason other than we want to. So the bank that we thought had financed the deal after we closed didn't finance it. We didn't have enough money to really do a proper integration, and quite frankly, we screwed up the integration anyway. And that led to the demise of Magic Hat. We got turned up around. I had a financial partner who was a $3 billion hedge fund before the banks collapsed, and they were going to finance the brewery. When the banks collapsed, they couldn't finance it. They couldn't give us any more money. We were cash starved. Nobody would give us any money. And we kind of just struggled on for 2 years until finally our owner sold us to the one company. I said, whatever you do, could you just not sell us to this one company? But long story, that's the company we were sold to, at which point I said, sayonara, I'm out of here. And that was the end of my career in the beer industry, or so I thought. Excuse me. So now, what am I going to do? I've been in the beer industry for 17 years. So I started looking around. And there's this potato chip company that is really struggling. And then the guy who started it and who owned it had a horrific accident and died. So all of a sudden, this potato chip company was up for grabs. And I was sitting around talking to some friends one night about, boy, that would be kind of fun. And one of the guys that I was talking to owned a piece of real estate in Burlington that Borders bookstores had just left, right on Church Street. If you know Burlington, Church Street is the main street. And he had a corner location on Church Street and had just lost his tenant. And I said, well, how would you like a Willy Wonka-esque potato chip factory in your corner location? He goes, oh, I love that. So we were gonna buy this company. We were going to put in a Willy Wonka-esque potato chip factory right downtown Church Street. We were going to do wacky names, we were going to do wacky flavors, and we were really excited about the idea of being in the potato chip business. After being in beer, which is very heavily regulated, the idea of being in an industry where you can actually give out stuff to anybody you want, even if they're 12 years old, was really appealing. You know, we were really constrained. And so we negotiated a price on the potato chip company. I had a contract. I had a term sheet that I had signed. It was sitting on my desk. It was waiting to go into the, does anybody remember they had these, used to have these machines where they were called fax machines? You put a piece of paper in and it transmitted it wherever you, to another phone? Well, it was ready to go into the fax machine. And the phone rang. And it was a guy named Jim Cook. Anybody recognize that name? And Jim owned this business called Boston Beer Company, which made Sam Adams. And Jim and I went back 15 years. We knew each other reasonably well. We were very different in many ways, and we're very similar in many ways. He's a whole lot smarter than I am. But he called and said, you know, Alan, I got this idea. You know, Boston Beer, we're really going great guns, we're doing really well, but there's a lot of opportunities out there that we can't take advantage of, because we need to stay focused on the main thing, and the main thing is Boston Beer. So why don't you come to work for Boston Beer, and why don't you go out and find some opportunities and go do those opportunities? I said, Jim, how long have you known me? You know my history. You know, if I do this, how it's going to end. He goes, no, Alan. It's going to be fine. I said, Jim, I don't know how, but all I can tell you is when this ends, it will not end fine. He said, no, I promise. I said, Jim, your promise is useless. What are you thinking about, though? And he says, you're going to run your own division. We'll just give you legal and financial help, and you go do whatever you want. You know, it was the proverbial deal that was too good to pass up. So, for the last 5 years, up until December 31, 2016, but who's counting, we created this division called Alchemy and Science. We had an office in Burlington. We built a brewery in LA called Angel City. Fabulous local brewery, great business. Then we started a business in New York called, we bought out a business of an old friend of mine called Coney Island Brewing Company. It wasn't doing much. We bought it, we rebranded it, we built a little brewery on Coney Island, can you imagine? And that really took off and was doing really well. And then we put a brewery in Miami. So at the end of my term, we had built out 3 separate local breweries in LA, Miami, and in New York. So I pretty much was in airports and planes constantly. And we also had a national brand called Traveler Beer, which I think there's some around here, which really, frankly, was more of a Boston beer project than an alchemy and science project. And that really went okay until Boston Beer's business started to decline. And then all of a sudden, the relationship between me and Boston Beer deteriorated at a rather rapid pace. You know, they were not prepared for me. You know, I was told, I was given very specific instructions. Your job, Alan, is to do things that we can't do. The problem was he had a whole company that was trained to only do what it was they did. And anything that we did was like an infection in a body. You know, every time a body gets a little infection, all the antibodies attack it. That's what it was like. Every time I went into Boston Beer, it was like all the antibodies would attack it. You know, why was I allowed to do it this way? Why couldn't I do it that way? It was a constant struggle. The concept of doing an entrepreneurial business in a large company, in my mind, it needs somebody a whole lot better than me, because it was a disaster. So my contract ended. See you folks, and as I predicted, Jim and I unfortunately don't speak any longer. Really too bad, but hardly what I would call a surprise. And so now, once again, I'm left out in the wilderness with nothing to do. Now, smart people would say, but Alan, you're 70 years old. You've been working 80 hours a week your whole life. Isn't it time to retire? And the answer would be, I am retired. I don't make any money, but I still work 80 hours a week. And I've started to do things that I like doing. I've kind of discovered at my age, I've kind of made a couple of rules. You know, number one, I only do things that now fit with my own personal values. If it's not going to fit in with my values, I'm too old to change. So I just ignore it. If I'm not passionate about what I'm doing, I lose 3/4 of my skill set. You know, what I bring to projects is enthusiasm, excitement, and the ability to break through any no. And if I don't have that passion, I'm just not successful. So I only deal with things that I'm passionate about, and I only deal with people who I like and who are going in the same direction. What I've learned is business is too damn difficult to succeed in, and it only gets worse when you're not dealing with people that are all going in the same direction. And I spent too many years fighting to get people going in the same direction as me that I no longer have any interest. And so I have now gone back to what was I passionate about. Remember the music story? So I bought into a local music club in Burlington called Higher Ground. I am now a partner in Higher Ground, and spend more time than I should on how do we grow the Higher Ground business. I'm also about to close on a deal where we're buying into with cash and with time to help a guy we've gotten to really like develop his boutique vinyl record pressing business. You know, there's a great connection with Higher Ground. I'm a niche guy. You know, everything I've done has been about niches. I'm really not good at mass marketing, general sales, but niches I get. And this is a niche business, and the couple that owns this thing, the cutest couple you ever want to see, hardworking, honest as the day is long. And as he said, you know, Alan, 2 years ago I was a drummer in a punk band. I don't know anything about business. So we're not only bringing cash to that business, but we'll bring business expertise to help him grow that business, and currently talking to 2 other people. So what I found is that at this age, what I really like doing is working with startup businesses, helping them grow, helping them figure out how to overcome some of the pitfalls that I've encountered. And that seems to be my new life, is running my own little venture capital fund very little by the way, and being involved with a bunch of local businesses that are really fun to work with. So that's kind of my story. And that's why I'm here, I guess. They thought that story would be of interest. Whether it is or not, I have no clue, but that's the story. Now we come to the piece that I like best, the question and answer piece. I'm assuming that you people aren't going to sit there like bumps on the log, that you'll have some questions. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to ask? I love this part. Yeah.
If you were going to give a piece of advice to somebody who's kind of in that dreamy stage, what would that be?
Can you repeat the question so the mic picks it up?
Sure. The question was, I'm in that dreamy stage. What do I do next? Was
What
that
advice would you give to somebody who's
keep
in that
dreaming? Business ideas are a dime a dozen. It's all about execution. And I thoroughly believe that you can take a really mediocre idea, execute the hell out of it, and be really successful. And conversely, you can take a really good idea, mess up the execution, i.e. the purchase of the brewery out on the West Coast was a great idea. We screwed up the execution, and we failed. So number one, don't get hung up on the idea. You know, ideas are just a starting place. Number two, something again, I was talking to somebody earlier today. There are two kinds of people in the world, in my opinion. One kind needs to see the whole picture unfold before them before they're willing to take the first step. Those are great people to work in other people's businesses. And then there are people like me. And there's a ton of us around. And we don't need to see the whole picture. We just need to see how to start. And we're willing to jump in and figure it out as we go. And again, now the trick is how do you make sure that you don't do stupid? And the key is to go slow, test your ideas. Don't invest heavily in any idea until you've tested it in the real world. You've tried it, you've tried to sell it, you've tried to offer it, whatever it is the idea is, and then build it slowly behind it. But don't worry about knowing where it's necessarily going at the start. Is that?
Awesome.
Yo.
So you talk about with the car company, you know, your market was 600,000 people in Vermont, and you saw quickly they need something bigger. Was it because you wanted to make more money, or were you trying to create something bigger than you and create a lasting impact?
The latter. I've never been driven by money, and I don't say this as a positive, because frankly, I actually think it's probably harmed me more than it's helped me. But I've never made a decision based on monies beyond age 23. So the question was, did I want to go outside of Vermont for money, or for, what was the other?
To create something bigger than you.
To create something bigger than me. It was the latter. I've always been a globalist, not a localist. The whole concept of supporting local is really lost on me. I don't understand why we sitting in this room are any better than people sitting in Ohio or in Syria or in India. And I think that in today's world, if we don't learn how to become one world, I just think that we got a real struggle on our hands. And I get local food, makes a lot of sense to me. I get some local manufacturing, but in terms of today, thinking about your local community as your only customer with the internet, to me is really short-sighted. And so I'm a niche guy, and what the internet has done has allowed people, niche people, to really define that niche as close as you can because you have access to the whole world. And I believe that the more specific you make a business, the greater your chances of success are. So I think that the global world today is really an oyster to play in, and to be able to define your niche smaller and smaller so that you can become the true expert in that field and have access to a global marketplace is much more important than serving the state of Vermont, if that And I don't mean that to sound arrogant. I love Vermont. I've been here since 1970. I'm going to die in Vermont. But I just don't have a local thing. I think that it's, we live in a bigger world than Vermont. Yeah.
I'm a psychologist, and I'm really interested in how you've dealt with all of the failures, you know, where you were rejected or fired, and you just like picked yourself up. And did you go through periods where you just felt like, you know, like I'm not worth anything, or where do I go from here, or did you just let it roll off your back, or how did you know?
It's a great question. Did everybody hear it, or do you want me to repeat it?
Repeat it for the mic.
So, from the psychologist in the room, how do I deal with all the failure in my life? How do I get out of bed every morning, given all the misery that I've gone through, the pain and the suffering? Did I capture that right? I don't know the answer. I have an innate ability to move back and forth between business and personal cleanly. I remember early on in my business career, I'd be on vacation with the family. The phone would ring, everything's on fire. I'd spend 20 minutes on the phone dealing with the fire, solving the problem, hanging up, and I was right back with my family. And it's just something that I've always had. I've also learned to look forward. The first time it happened, I'm not going to lie to you. When I was kicked out of 7th Generation, less so with Garden Supply. There was actually, I left out a whole lineage story with Garden Supply, but 7th Generation was the first one where I was really, it was my baby. It was my idea. I created it. I made the name. I created the brand. I created something out of nothing, and then this comes in and I'm out. And that one took me probably 3 months to get over. But then I started developing, I picked myself up and I said, okay, what am I going to do? So I've always kind of had the ability to look forward rather than back. At 7th Generation, you know, one of my favorite stories is I showed up one day. I sat at my desk and there's a 7th Generation catalog on my desk. And I've never seen this catalog before. Now, I touched everything at 7th Generation in those days. Nothing happened without my involvement. So how in the world did we produce this catalog that I've never seen? So I started looking through it. And as I'm looking through it, people are gathering around my desk. And all of a sudden I realized, this is not a 7th Generation catalog. Somebody has knocked this off 100%. Same colors, same type, same layout, same product. I mean, it looked just like the 7th Generation catalog. And the whole staff is gathering around me going, what are you going to do, Alan? What are you going to do, huh? What are you going to do, huh? And I said, nothing. We're not going to do anything. We're going to continue improving what we do. And as long as we keep doing what we do and staying ahead of the market and continue becoming the best in what we do, they'll fail. I never saw another one of those catalogs. So I've always had this ability to look forward. I don't get hung up on the past. I don't tend to dwell on the past. And as I've gotten older and as I've had more experiences to learn from, I've gotten better at creating a methodology to move forward, which I have just articulated to both my son and my daughter, who are both trying to figure out what's next. And that's the best I can do. You know, we were talking earlier about teaching people how to be entrepreneurs. And that subject fascinates me because I don't know how you do that. You know, what I do can't be taught. I mean, that makes no sense. So it fascinates me that I can do this because I don't understand why. So that's probably not going to work really well for you, but it's the best I can do. No. Yes?
Did the companies buy you out?
Did the companies buy me out?
Yeah, you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. No, you know, as my daughter will tell you, if you don't want the answer, don't ask me the question. I have absolutely no filter. Gardner Supply Company wasn't big enough and successful enough for me to get bought out for anything substantial. You know, I did get some nickels. I don't want to downplay it. I don't remember what it was. You know, maybe it was 25 or maybe it was $50,000. It was enough to move me into the next business, just barely. Seventh generation, I got, do you know what bumpkiss is? That's what I got. I got bumpkiss. But then, you know, life, I believe in karma. You know, so a year and a half after I left, I got a call from the lawyer, who was our corporate lawyer, who I knew well and I considered to be almost a friend, because lawyers are never exactly friends. They're almost human. And, sorry, whoever I just offended. And I got a call from one day and said, so, Alan, I need you to sign a lockup. A lockup, I still own the stock because they couldn't afford to buy it back. A lockup is when you agree not to sell your stock for a certain period of time. Seventh generation wanted to go public, and the company taking them public wanted all the major shareholders to sign a lockup agreement so that we didn't flood the market with our shares to bring down the stock price. And I said, and I would do that because? And he said, well, because it's the right thing to do. Now. Let's try again. And I said, so what happens if I don't sign this lockup? He said, well, the whole deal comes to a halt. I said, I like this position. And so I did get paid at that point. I want to say, again, I think it was like $120,000. So it was not nothing. It was the exact amount I needed to start Magic Hat. So it was enough to start Magic Hat, but barely. Now, one of my all-time favorite stories is after they kicked out the guy who kicked me out, they brought in a new CEO who I became good friends with. He had been told that this other guy was the founder of the company, and when he found out that that wasn't true, he went, oh, who started it? And they told him, and he said, is that the same guy that started Magic Hat? He had been in the beer business and was very familiar with Magic Hat's rollout into New York. It's a long, long story. So we became good friends. About 3 years ago, he called me one day and said, hey, how about coming to lunch with the chairman of the board and our lawyer, who was my personal lawyer. And so I said, sure. I didn't know why, it seemed odd. And at that lunch, they actually gave me a reasonable amount of options that they said they didn't feel right about the way I'd been treated, and they wanted me to have some share in Seventh Generation's future. And they actually, which to me was probably the nicest thing. Nobody has to do that. So I ended up getting a little bit of money out of Seventh Generation when they just sold to that company they just sold to. So, you know, I always get something, but a fraction of what I believe the value to the new owner is. So I've really never made a lot of, everybody believes I have all this money, and it's a great belief, and I just wish I had the same belief. Don't feel sorry for me. I have a roof over my head. I drive a nice car because that's my toy. But I don't have a lot of money, and I really do kind of have to continue working, and which I believe is a good thing, because when I'm not working, I get very lazy. And lazy is just not good for me. You know, quite frankly, I'm much better off when I have things I have to do. So in some ways, you know, it's always worked in my favor, or at least that's the way I hold it, so that I don't cry every day. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I missed something, but
Me too.
you're drinking Magic Hat, right? Or
Yes.
Magic Hat exists.
Yes. I have nothing to do with it. It's the beer that's here. I'm very undiscriminate.
So, right. so it carried on without it just kept going. It was
Yeah, but it's been down pretty much 15 to 20% every year since I left. in a market that's growing 20% a year. They, when you take out, entrepreneurs, in my opinion, are valuable to businesses because we create chaos. And new businesses, and Magic Hat was still not a truly established business. There is no such thing in the beer world, quite frankly. You need chaos, because the moment you get comfortable in an area, chaos is where all the interesting ideas come from. And so when you take chaos out of the equation, you need order also. And I've got a guy who's now worked with me at 7th Generation, Magic Hat, Alchemy and Science, who keeps the trains running. And I can't do anything without him. But he also needs somebody to create chaos, to always be exploring in new directions. So when you take that chaotic factor out of a business, and I see it happen all the time, it tends to dry up the creativity. And craft beer is about creativity. It's not about the beer, folks. There's too many different companies making great beers out there. So it's really the gestalt of the whole business. And, the name that I've been using for years for my business is Alchemy and Science. And I do that because, to me, that's what business is. It's combining the magic of alchemy with the math of science. And when you can combine those two, you really have something special. When you take either part out, you end up falling down. And so they're not what they were. There's one beer out of that whole group, or two beers out of that group, that didn't exist when I left. Everything else existed when I left, in a world of craft beer that has been reinvented 3 times since I left. And so I love them dearly. I wish them all the greatest success. I wish that they could be more successful. I have absolutely no ill will toward the people who own it and who are running it today. But I would love to see a little more creativity, and I'd love to see a little bit more chaos.
Well, let's give Alan, so can I squeeze one in, and then we're gonna go into the raffle. So the spirit of entrepreneurship, in your VC business, you're basically in the business of picking winners. So what do you look for in entrepreneurs?
I look for people. Somebody taught me this early on. Venture capitalists, private equity, invests in people, not businesses. Because when they see the business plan, the only thing they know is that what's on the plan will not succeed. And so they're betting on somebody who's going to figure out how to take that plan and make it work when that plan doesn't work. And so I use the same approach. I look for people who are hardworking, who are smart, who I really like, and who I think are really dedicated and passionate about their business, so that if the original plan doesn't work, they'll figure out how to find a way to succeed. And, Higher Ground, my partner is a guy who's been in this business. I've known him for 20 years. He has a 20-year history of success. And without him, I would not have bought into Higher Ground. The vinyl pressing business, the guy that owns it, just hardworking, honest, you couldn't find a better person to run a business. He knows this vinyl pressing business cold. He's been studying it. He's been working it. He rebuilt all of his own equipment. He focuses on quality. He really dwells on making sure that every record that leaves his shop is perfect. And that's what I look for. I look for people who I think will overcome the adversities that I know they're going to experience. Yeah.
Last question, and then we're going to move on. Thank you.
You're saying that you can't teach it, but I think what you've done is given a great synopsis for the stirring bowl in the alchemical process. And if we're paying attention at all, it seems like that's where we're headed. So I'd like to get your kind of little deeper thoughts into that, because it seems like you just got the basics.
Now I'm about to insult another group of people here, because I tend to do it inadvertently.
Bravo.
Those who can do, Those who can't teach. I don't mean to besmirch teachers. I really don't. You know, I'm a huge fan of teachers, and I think they do an invaluable service. I don't know that you can teach how to succeed. And as I was just talking about, yeah, I talked about some things that I learned. I could talk for 3 hours about things that I've learned. I wrote a book. Go to Google. Go to
Amazon.
no.
Phantom Bookshop.
No. I mean, so Amazon. You know, Amazon has a book that I wrote, you know, for Alchemy and Science, you know, where I talk about a lot of the things that I learned. But each one of them has a place in a moment in time. That doesn't mean that if you were to do a business, that you're going to face those same problems, or that the solutions that I found to deal with my problem are going to work for you. You know, what I do, in my opinion, is, and I'm not going to go here, I'm not going to tell you where, I'm too embarrassed, and I don't embarrass easily to talk about why, but I learned to take responsibility. And at the end of the day, when I do a business, I'm fully responsible for it. If something is not working, I fix it. I say this all the time, and people think I'm kidding. I promise you, I am not. I don't consider myself to be all that bright. One of my strengths is knowing that I'm not that bright. So what I'm good at is I'm good at surrounding myself with people much smarter than me and creating a culture that they're comfortable sharing their stupidest ideas in. And my strength is when I hear the right idea, for some reason, I know which one to take, and I go, okay, that one. And then I know how to move the whole organization toward that goal, everybody working together. That's what I do. I build culture. And that's my way. I get, you know, probably 4 times a month, I'm talking to somebody who has an idea, and a friend of a friend puts them in contact with me, and they tell me their idea, and I start off by saying, that's the stupidest thing that I've ever heard. And every single thing that I've ever done, everybody I talked to told me it was the stupidest thing they ever heard. And in 1983, some guy named Ben Cohn showed up at my office and said, I want you to read this private placement. We have this great plan. And I read this idea of putting an ice cream factory in the middle of a field in farm country. And I remember thinking, Ben, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. That's where Ben & Jerry's now is. So my belief is that entrepreneurs see things that nobody else sees. There is no right way, there is no wrong way. It's about taking responsibility and seeing a path to get where you want to go. And every time there's a road, every time there's a detour in your way, your job is to figure out how to get around the detour without changing your course. You know, so I think, you know, every business has a vision, and to me the vision is about, I want to go to California, and I have a route that I want to go to California. So I'm always going to California. But as I'm driving, a bridge is down. So you got to figure out a way to get around that bridge and still head to California. And then you come to a highway that's closed. So you got to figure out how to get around it. And that to me is what business is about. It's about figuring out how to get around the obstacles that are built in to stop you from doing everything. There is no right, there is no wrong, which is one of the reasons why I think it's hard to teach. That help? That answer?
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you.
So before Alan goes, we have a couple small gifts that represent some of the businesses that he owned. Hopefully you threw your tickets in to these baskets on your way in. So the first one is some items from Gardner Supply Company. Let's see, I don't know if you could read those numbers off. I don't know.
Ticket number 7620989. Here we go.
Yeah, all right.
Pledge should always.
So while he's coming up here, I just remind you, take a look at our sponsors again. We couldn't do these types of events if it wasn't for our sponsors. They're really important to pull these kinds of things off. So please, if you're not here, go frequent their establishments as well. So second one, let's do 7th generation. So we have some 7th generation products here. Lucky ticket is...
Number 7620974.
Yeah. So he's coming up, right? We get to use the time and walk slow. So Dimitri mentioned this at the beginning, right? In September, Ann Galloway, Vermont Digger, coming. We don't know if it's going to be here yet. We're still working out the details, but coming again. Key, independent, non-fake news.
There
right?
may not be fake news by then.
There might not be. I want to just mention that in addition to these kind of signature leadership series events that the Lightning Jar does, you remember we had Jen Kimmich here, now we have Alan, we got Andy. The Lightning Jar does a series of other events, much smaller, at the Lightning Jar. Yeah, so again, one more thank you to Alan, everybody, please.